Good morning. Today it is pouring rain outside. Hopefully this video is light enough. We're going to do a striped silk scarf. I have done a video of this already, but looking back on it, I did leave out quite a few some important factors. So I'm going to try to be a bit clearer this time. First of all, the silk, you have to have really fine silk. This is pongé, it's called. It's 5mm. That's the other thing. If you're looking and it's not called pongé, but it's 5mm, then that's good. The reason for that is that the dye is going through about 8 layers, so it has to be able to sink right through. Anything heavier, it's not going to go through in a really solid way. So what I do with this, you would start with a scarf about 15 by 72 inches, which is a normal kind of large size scarf. Any scarf selling company would have that size, either 14 or 15 by 72. Mine is a little bigger, but don't worry about that. What I need to put it in is a tray, some kind of plastic tray. This, if you're worried about that dye, it's dyed the tray, it's not going to come off on anything. You need a plastic tray at least 15 inches wide. You know, if it's 14, your scarf is 15, don't worry about it. But you need one length to be about the width of your scarf. And obviously a little bit of width if you found a tray 15 inches wide that was that narrow, wouldn't work. So what I do with the scarf is I wet it first. I don't wash it. I just wet it and swish it around, and then I roll it in a towel to take the excess water off. So this is damp, it's not totally wet. Then I'm going to shake it out. I have to do this off camera, apologies. And fold it in half, find the middle, shake it out a bit so it's nice and the wrinkles are all out of it. And then grab the other end and fold it in half again, which I will show you in a minute. So here's my scarf folded. There's 4 layers there. Now I'm going to lay it in the tray. And then I'm going to fold it back a bit, again, so it fits. So fold it up until you've got it fitting in the tray. My size scarf does come up the edges a bit, but I take care of that. It's not really going to be a big deal. I would actually like it if these were exactly that width, but I can deal with that. Okay, so we've got our scarf. It's slightly damp. Now the dyes, I do have another video, which I will put a card on here of how to mix these dyes. They are fiber reactive dyes, which means fiber reactive dyes can dye without being heated up. So these will just sit on the scarf. The scarf will have to be kept damp and be somewhere fairly warm. They work better if it's about 70 degrees or above. So they're covered with plastic to keep them damp. They have to stay damp and, you know, not freezing for at least 6 hours. So they don't have to have vinegar, they don't have to have any other setting thing. There is some salt in this dye to keep it stable. Otherwise, it's just the time that they need to set. Okay, so now I'm going to put the color on. This is a previously dyed one. You could just splash the color on any way you want, but I tend to do stripes. For me, it seems to be the most pleasing way to do these. And they're going to stay crinkled afterwards, and I'll show you that after. So you put your gloves on. This can be quite messy when you start spraying these bottles on. They can kind of spray everywhere if you're not careful. These bottles are just ketchup and mustard bottles. I got them at the local cash and carry store, and they're great. They're great for using this. They're inexpensive. You can have tons of colors. So I'm going to be brave and do a pink and green variation here. I'm going to start with this particular color is a Dharma trading color. They have their own fiber reactive dyes, and this one is hot pink. I love it. It's a really nice pink. There's so many different shades of every color that you could get, and it's amazing how they have to be the right shade. You know, I prefer certain pinks, other people, and certain pinks, say, would go with certain blues better. You could play with color forever. So I do a little stripe. I didn't talk about that. Let's do the green. I am going to be brave and put it right next to the pink. So while I do this, I'm just squeezing it a little bit, squeeze it out, and then because it has to go through all these layers and I just don't want a whole bunch of white marks, I press it down. And I'll just run my hand, my gloved hand, that's why you need gloves, to make sure it goes through the layers. Plus, because my silk is going up a little bit at the edge, I'm pushing it down there to make sure it's going in right at the edge, because often you'll get little white marks if you didn't do that. Now, what I keep handy is just a basin of water to dip my gloves in between touching the silk. I'm doing that right now off camera, just so I don't have pink and green on when I start putting the purple on. So now I'm going to put boysenberry, I think. Oh, I didn't put, I need a little bit more green. Maybe I'll put green on this edge. I'm really winging it when I do these. This is not a technique for someone who likes a lot of control. I do have certain colors that I do over and over again. But then sometimes I'll just try a mix. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's absolutely gorgeous. Sometimes it's just okay. So that's the green. I'm going to try, now boysenberry is a very strong color. I think I want to see boysenberry by the pink. And the other nice thing about these is that it's fun to let the colors blend. One of my most popular colorways is using all the primary colors, using a yellow, a red, and 2 blues. And they mix to make green and purple. So those mixing colors can be quite beautiful. So I've got the green, I've got the grape. I'm going to put my lavender in there. Oh, I think this could be quite interesting. One combination I try to avoid is green and purple. I'm getting it there, because you can get quite ugly browns sometimes, but that's why I'm being brave in this stuff. So I'm going to put pinks and purple are easy. Adding the green can be iffy. So I think I'll put a little bit of purple by this pink. And then I don't want to overcome that pink. I want it to still show. And then a little bit of the boysenberry. The other, I'm pretty sure I say this in my other video, but I found the best fiber reactive dyes are from Pro Chemical. You'll get it, it'll say D&K dyes. Pro Chemical and dye, those are the best, as in my opinion. But also Dharma has fiber reactive dyes. It's their own, they blend their own colors, and some of their colors are just great, and you can't find them anywhere else. A couple of the ones I use, the hot pink, which I was talking about. The other one I really like from them is called Cayman Island Green, and it's a beautiful greeny turquoise. And cerulean blue, their cerulean blue is really nice. Otherwise, I get them from Pro Chemical. So I've got one other stripe here. I think I'll do the lavender, because I only... Now, when you look at this, it looks so messy and kind of in your face, messy. But it's not going to, these are much darker than they'll turn out once you've rinsed them. Not much darker, I mean, they'll still be good colors, but you can't tell what it's going to look like at this point. Let me put it that way. So now I'm going to take this tray, push that down a bit. Just check that you don't have any little white pale areas along the edges. And I'm going to put it on another table and cover it with plastic. I use, all my silk comes in these big plastic bags. It doesn't matter what kind of plastic. The plastic is to keep the scarf damp. So I'm going to cover it And what I do is I lay a few trays out together, and then I'll put plastic on them, and then crossways I'll lay some more trays out so I can layer it. So I'm going to try to keep the air out so the whole thing is to keep them warmer and damper. And I'm going to leave this for the whole day. You have to leave them for at least 6 hours, but you can leave them overnight. You can leave them for 20 hours if you want. It shouldn't hurt the colors as long as they stay damp. The colors will get a bit richer at some point. You know, they'll be as rich as they can get. So leaving them for 36 hours isn't going to make them any better than, say, probably 12 hours, really. I find it convenient to leave them overnight. Or if I'm doing it like now, I'm doing this early in the morning, I'll probably rinse them at about 8 o'clock. And I will talk about the rinsing later. Okay, now we're going to do another simple way of dyeing silk, also in a tray. This is a smaller scarf, but you can do this with any size. This happens to be an infinity scarf. It's about 11 inches wide and it's quite long. So I take the scarf, and this silk doesn't have to be really fine for the striped scarf where we layer 8 layers in the tray. It has to be 5mm silk. This can be pretty much any silk. This is your regular Habitai 8mm, which is very common weight for a silk scarf. So Habitai 8mm, or anything, really, you could dye anything this way. Your result might be different. This technique, and possibly, like, these techniques are good on silk because the dye spreads well. I could do the same on cotton. I've even done the same on a heavier silk, a silk crepe, and the marks are just not as interesting. This is so fine, it really catches all the detailed blendings of colors. If you try a heavier, thicker silk like crepe, you get blotches rather than interesting little marks. So 8mm Habitai, that'll work. Any kind of Habitai, probably. It's a smooth, shiny silk. So I'm going to put my gloves on. You've got to have gloves for this. And the stripes I did in pink and green. Today must be a pink and purple day. I'm going to use pink and purple on this. So I've taken the scarf, I've wet it, don't have to wash it, and then I put it in a towel. This is important. You can do it really wet, but the dyes will, and you might prefer that, the dyes will distribute differently. I roll it in a towel so it's damp, just slightly damp. This way the dye can kind of find its shape without running all over the place. That's my opinion anyway. I think that's what happens. So I'm going to start with one color. And I just kind of press it in certain areas. This is my style. Please play. You could do whatever you want. I try to put little areas evenly distributed around the scarf. I used to turn it over to make sure it was going through. I don't do that so much anymore because it's so messy. And now it depends. If you want total coverage, you don't want any white showing, you might want to do that. Now I'm going to do boysenberry, beautiful boysenberry. Just a darker. The boysenberry is a pro-chemical dye color. So is the hot pink. I'm using hot pink, boysenberry, and lavender. The lavender is a Dharma Trading fiber reactive dye. They're all the same kind of dye. They're just from a different company. I'm sure every person who dyes things or paints things has their favorite colors, favorite shades of favorite colors. So you see, this is just going to be all mixed. I would call it like a tweedy thing where there's different colors all over the place. Because it's spring, I'm going to leave a little bit of white. In the winter and fall, I tend to try to cover everything, but leaving little bits of lighter color and white is nice in spring and summer. It's just a lighter, more summery kind of look. I'm tempted to look underneath. Usually underneath is darker, if anything, because the dye's sinking down. So that's that one done. Now, it is sitting in dye underneath, but you can't really do much about that. You'll have a mixture of color all over the scarf. We will look at these when they're finished. So I'm going to take that over to my other table, and I'm going to cover it with plastic for the rest of the day, really. I'll probably rinse them this evening. So that's your Scrunch dye, I call this, because you scrunch up the silk and just splash the color on. Have fun with it. So next we have to rinse the scarves. So I take one tray at a time to the sink. I run cold water. I use an extra basin so my sink doesn't get overly messy. And clean the tray off right away. Dye is very messy, so clean as you go. The dye comes off the tray very easily. And remember, this is cold water or cool water. It doesn't have to be freezing. The cool water actually stops the dye action, so it won't be actually having a chemical reaction anymore. As you'll see, there's a lot of dye ends up in the water. With a lot of dye processes, there is a lot of excess dye that gets washed away in the rinse. And this just means it's not going to mess up. It wouldn't anyway. At this point, if you see that yellow and red on the scarf, it's not going to get dyed blue because there's a lot of blue in the water. Pull it all apart. Make sure you've got the folds all undone to give it a good rinse. And then rinse it around and squeeze it out and put it on the tray. You can rinse a number of scarves in the same water. That water is not dyeing anything, and the excess dye will still come off. I usually change the water a couple times. Now they're all rinsed. They all have had their first rinse. I'm going to fill the basin with some warm water this time, and I'm going to put about 4 scarves in one basin. And more color will come out. I think right now I'm just giving it a secondary kind of swish around to get some of the excess colored water off. But then I'll let them sit for about half an hour. It doesn't matter how long you let them sit, but what that does is it allows all the excess dye to just leach out of the scarves. You could stand there like constantly rinsing, emptying for a while, but you don't have to. If you let it sit, most of the excess dye will come out over time. It just needs a bit of time. So I've put 4 scarves in there. They're all different colors. It's amazing, but it's perfectly safe. They're not going to dye each other at this point. The water is warm. You could have it hot, but I would stick with warm water at this point. And then once they've sat, you should rinse each one individually in some hot water. You can add vinegar at that point, but they should be finished after that half hour of soaking. Then you just take each of them and roll them up in a towel to take the excess water off. Okay, here are our crinkle scarves. They're all dyed. I'm just going to show you how you crinkle them. Pretend this one is wet. Once you've rinsed them, which was in the previous section, squeeze them out, roll them in a towel so they're just damp. Leave them for about 10 minutes, whatever. So pretend this one is damp. Shake it out so it's nice and even. And then fold it in half and just put your index finger or your whole hand through there and start twisting. I've got my other hand holding on here. Just keep twisting till it's nice and tight all the way till the other end. Okay, so there's my ends. And then bring your hands together and it'll just twirl on itself. So it looks like a skein of wool. And then just hang that somewhere until it's dry. And then when you undo it, those crinkles will stay in for really as long as you want them to. Feel free to iron them if you prefer to create a super soft shimmery scarf.